to break into the marijuana industry. It invests in programs to support our nonprofits, cultural programs, and neighborhoods. It leverages a variety of funds to double our affordable housing efforts, build on our successful social impact bond model, and resolve homelessness for hundreds more of unhoused neighbors. Now, this funding will support more housing access programs like down payment assistance and home ownership counseling, hundreds more hotel and motel rooms, more tiny home villages, and more safe outdoor spaces and safe parking spaces. They will also fund housing vouchers, wraparound services, and programs to keep people from falling into homelessness in the first place, such as rental and utility assistance, eviction protection, and of course, creating new and preserving existing affordable homes. And this budget proposal makes strategic community-based public safety investments into improved policing and targeted crime prevention to keep Denver residents safe and our neighborhoods safe. Now, we will continue efforts at innovative community-based policing and alternative interventions that recognize the distinction between behavioral health challenges and criminal activity, a space where Denver is a national leader. We will also address the need for hiring more law enforcement officers and partnering with nonprofit and community-based organizations to broaden our crime prevention efforts. That includes $13.6 million to be deployed to hire new first responders at the Denver Police, Sheriff, and Fire Departments and 911 call takers. Now, let me, for a moment, divert. Once again, during the State of the City address, we invited Denver residents, those who have shared with us their concerns and have talked about better policing, better public safety throughout the city of Denver. I just once again want to invite you, be the solution that you're looking for. We invite you, we're hiring. We would love to have you join our public safety department or any department in the city and county of Denver. Now, as we continue as a companion to this budget, we will also be proposing allocations of the funding we received from the American Rescue Plan to provide additional support and funding relief to local businesses and local workers, community recovery from mental health to digital equity and youth well-being, housing and shelter services for our unhoused neighbors, and maintaining our commitment to affordable housing by bolstering the Affordable Housing Fund. This fiscally responsible budget will help sustain our recovery, support thousands of new jobs and job training programs, stimulate our economy, keep our residents and neighborhoods safe, and put new programs into place to improve services to our vulnerable neighborhoods and residents. And it does all this by investing in our people and putting their recovery first and foremost. Now, before I close, I want to address a threat to everything that I just said, a threat to not only our 2022 budget strategies and plans for dollars, including potential cuts to the city's dedicated sales tax initiatives. Let me talk about that for just a moment. Preschool, Denver's preschool program, Denver's scholarship program, Denver's homeless initiatives embedded in the sales tax that the people overwhelmingly supported last year. Our ability to pave our roads, ability to collect on a timely fashion as we have come to expect in our city, our solid waste, our trash. Our ability to continue to protect residents and keep this city safe, our police, our fire, our sheriffs. Our partnership with Denver Health to take care of our indigent residents who need medical care from the best trauma facility in the country. All of these will be threatened if Initiative 304 passes. I want to make it very clear, it will result in immediate up to $80 million in cuts from the budget if it passes. We need our residents to tune in and understand that this initiative that was initiated by people outside of city government who apparently bring a more conservative bent and expectations of our delivery of services stand to threaten everything this city has built over the years in partnership with the residents of this great city. And so we ask you to tune in and to be mindful of that initiatives. It's a possibility we are planning for, the details of which we will address if needed. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Brendan Hanlon, for the additional details on the budget proposal and the current revenue forecast for 2022. Brendan?
Thank you, Mayor. You bet. Good morning. My name is Brendan Hanlon, the city's Chief Financial Officer. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Mayor Hancock. Thank you for your leadership during these very trying times. As the mayor noted, it has been a challenging budget year, but for different reasons than for 2021. This year brings with it some hope of recovery. It brings with it additional funds from the federal government and our capital funds in an effort to invest in our recovery. But before I get started, I wanted to thank the finance team who has been working diligently over the past few months to formulate this budget, specifically Budget Director Stephanie Adams and the entire Budget and Management team, Laura Perry and the Capital Planning and Real Estate team who continue to ensure that our capital investments support robust recovery, Margaret Danuser and the finance team who have been administering our federal emergency and recovery funds. The $1.49 billion 2022 budget is financially and fiscally responsible and continues to rebuild our financial reserves that we've used in 2020 to bolster our response to trying economic conditions during the pandemic. This budget brings with it its own complexities. It is a combination of local investments. This includes the 2022 budget. We have a proposed $450 million general obligation bond, the RISE Denver GO bond, that is in front of voters right now. That would be contributing to our local recovery. And we are also accelerating the deployment of our approved Elevate Denver bond funds. The mayor mentioned the American Rescue Plan funds provided to us from the federal government. That's $308 million of recovery investment. And we are hopeful that additional federal funds will come from President Biden's Build Back Better infrastructure plan, as well as state recovery funds that we will partner with the state to deploy. These funds together will galvanize our recovery. With all these funds combined, we have a once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-a-generation investment in our whole community that will echo through time. Before I get into the budget details, I do want to provide a brief overview of our economic condition. Let's start with the positives. The mayor is absolutely correct. Vaccinations in the city and county in Denver are strong, they are high. Statewide, they are high, and that provides people confidence to have in-person economic interactions. It is a point of confidence in our economic performance and in our finances that we have seen from May through August of this year. We anticipate that we will start seeing an ease in supply chain disruptions that we have been seeing in the first part of this year that has specifically led to some inflation challenges, but we imagine that those are going to be moderating. However, the mayor is right. Our recovery is fragile, and we are monitoring multiple factors that could potentially impact it. We need more people to be vaccinated to provide us absolute certainty that our recovery is on the right trajectory. If we have a significant portion of our population that is unvaccinated, there is risk that could implicate additional public health restrictions, and that is the last thing economically that we can afford to have, but it does bring with it some uncertainty, specifically when it comes to the Delta variant. There are many industries that remain struggling, specifically tourism and hospitality industry, and those industries that are struggling to find workers. That is a particular challenge, not just in city government, but across our private sector economy. There are many federal protections that are ending as well, such as eviction and foreclosure moratoriums, enhanced unemployment benefits, and enhanced SNAP benefits as well. Those programs are coming to a close. We remain concerned about inflation, but we are hoping it is trending in the right direction. And to the mayor's point about an equitable recovery, we have seen high wage earners fare better than low wage earners and its counterparts, and this is a key area of investment in the 2022 budget process to make sure that we have a level playing field for all wage earners. So talking about some of our economic statistics, we have some areas of strength and some areas of concern. I'm going to start with consumer spending. This is an area of positivity. We have seen strong consumer spending numbers in sales and use tax, and that is promoted by consumer confidence. And we have also seen collections from out-of-state retailers. We have seen some challenges when it comes to consumer sentiment, though, over the time as the Delta variant has increased and as jobs have been difficult to fill. Employment. We have seen unemployment be challenged here in Denver. In my career, it is usually Denver that is leading recovery in terms of unemployment statistics. In this case, both national and state numbers are outperforming Denver's. But on the positive side, our employed workers are up more than 8,700 since January 2021. So there is an irregular nature to this economic recovery that could be seen looking at different industries. As I mentioned before, high-wage sectors are faring better than low-wage sectors, and industries that have focused on leisure and hospitality have been particularly challenged. So fortunately, Denver has has strong vaccination numbers. This is promoting confidence, but there are still choppy waters that we will need to navigate. For our financial overview, we need to go back to 2020. Our revenues took a $211 million reduction, a hit of $211 million. One of the most significant economic impacts since the Great Recession, and then before that, the Great Depression. In 2021, we are on track to recover $113 million. A portion of this was built into our base budget, so this is partially what we had assumed, but also an element of recovery. In 2022, we are projecting revenue growth at $97 million, or 7%. That puts us near revenue levels that we were projecting 2 years ago. So that is good news, but we are also 2 years behind. Our revenue growth has been led by sales and use tax. That was the revenue stream that was most disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. It is then the first to recover. Unfortunately, areas like lodgers tax remain below 2019 levels of performance, and we imagine that is going to last for a few more years. As the mayor had mentioned, we do have partners in the federal government. We will be leveraging American Rescue Plan Act dollars as part of this allocation. We have done some of that in 2021 already. We have started to restore city services and hire new positions that had been suspended during our response to the pandemic. This year, as part of our 2021 plan, we plan to continue those investments into 2022, as well as propose to City Council $73 million worth of recovery investments focused on services and shelter for people experiencing homelessness, housing, small business, community needs like childcare, digital equity, mental health, and behavioral health supports. We will be bringing that proposal to City Council in early October. So, some details into this equitable, fiscally responsible budget. The first area I'm going to be focusing on is recovery, and specifically talking about our plan to recover based on investments in infrastructure. Public infrastructure is a core responsibility of city government. It is a tool that we have used repeatedly to recover from previous recessions. We are leaning into our Elevate Denver bond program and leaning into the allocation of those funds to deploy those as quickly as possible. As I mentioned before, we also have a $450 million general obligation bond in front of voters at this point in time. It's important to note those 5 questions total 7,500 jobs and $1 billion of economic activity. These two tools will be paired with $200 million in our annual capital improvement fund to maintain our momentum in our recovery. Those funds focus on transportation and mobility in parks and open space and recreation, as well as city facilities. We made a commitment 5 years ago to invest $2 billion over 12 years in our mobility action plan. Currently, we stand at $1.2 billion against that goal of $2 billion. This year's budget includes $85 billion in transportation and mobility projects. Highlighted in that allocation, $5.7 million for transit. That is a 1,000% increase over the prior year's budgets thanks to increased parking revenues. $6.9 million to continue building out the bike network, $4.8 for sidewalks, $3.5 million for transportation and mobility safety, Vision Zero type programming. $46 million in parks and recreation improvements, including $3.5 million for the Civilian Conservation Corps camp restoration at Red Rocks, which will also serve as an opportunity to leverage workforce resources and get people good paying jobs. $42 million is also identified for city facilities, specifically $6 million improving access to our city facilities, and $10 million, and I want to take a moment on this one talking point. $10 million in our central library. This was a question that came up as part of our Rise Denver program. It was something that was not in that program. $10 million has been identified to invest in that core city facility and continue the renovations of that facility. Focus now on the equity side of recovery. We are focused on equity across the city, but specifically in our neighborhoods that are that have been most vulnerable to displacement. We have a $1.2 million program in an investment impact tool. So where the city is making investments, we sometimes run into challenges where people cannot afford to stay in those neighborhoods. We're setting aside $1.4 million in a program that will allow us to invest in ways of keeping people in their neighborhoods as the city make investments in those neighborhoods that have been historically left behind. Job creation requires a skilled workforce, and the 2020 budget invests in scaling up workforce training centers and career development, specifically $2 million in a construction career program, bringing the total of that program to $3.2 million, $4.5 million in the new Climate Protection Fund to recruit, train, and bolster the climate action workforce. The mayor noted that we will be directly investing $5.7 million in a new business development fund to leverage retail marijuana tax to prioritize funding for small and minority and women-owned businesses throughout the economy and in the marijuana industry specifically. We propose also investing $10 million in ARPA funds into business resiliency, specifically $2 million to support entrepreneurship in traditionally underserved neighborhoods. The city will also ask City Council for an $11.8 million investment of American Rescue Plan dollars to support multiple aspects of community recovery and those include mental health to digital equity to youth well-being. We have a multitude of different investments when it comes to our new Climate Protection Fund. This fund, as the mayor referenced, it generates its revenues from a dedicated sales tax. It would be implicated in the initiative that the mayor described. We are spending $5 million in infrastructure investments. $3.7 million from the Climate Protection Fund is for climate-focused transportation supports for low-income communities. $11.5 million to support projects such as solar carports and subsidized community solar subscriptions for low-income households. Really important investments. We're leaning into the climate challenge. Those would be impacted by that initiative. In our housing program, we are investing $190 million in affordable housing, housing stability, and support for people experiencing homelessness. Of that $90 million is being dedicated to support people experiencing homelessness, including $40 million from the new sales tax generated to be homeless resolution fund, which would be implicated in that initiative, $21 million in planned investments from ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, and $28.5 million from the general fund. These efforts will deliver 900 affordable homes, support another 305 supportive housing units paired with services, around-the-clock shelter improvements, acquisition of housing and shelter that combine multiple uses, including safe outdoor spaces, tiny home villages, and safe outdoor parking. In the third priority of safety, the mayor is right to emphasize are the historic challenges that we are experiencing in attrition in our public safety organizations. We are leaning in with an investment of $13.6 million to hire new first responders in police, sheriff, fire, and 911 call takers to restore our safety workforce. Safety should mean the right response at the right time for people in crisis. We continue to invest in the STAR program, or the program, the acronym stands for Support Team Assisted Response Program. An additional $1 million in that program, that paired with existing general fund dollars and Caring for Denver dollars, Caring for Denver supported by sales and use tax dedicated to it, will total a $3.8 million program and allow for a citywide application of the STAR program across the city. $1 million is being identified for a new crisis response team in the Sheriff's Department for emergency mental health support inside of our jail system. So think of a STAR program inside of our safety facilities. We're also identifying $950,000 to create an assessment intake diversion center that will serve as additional alternative response for our criminal justice system. Those are the programmatic highlights, but I always like to end on where we've come from and where we are going, specifically when it comes to our financial practices and our reserves. The mayor is right that we need to emphasize restoration of our reserves, provide ourselves with a safety net in this time of uncertainty. When the mayor and I first started, we were experiencing the continued effects of the Great Recession and rebuilt our reserves from 10.7% back to 15%. By the end of 2020, we had 18% reserves. When the pandemic hit, we used nearly $90 million of those reserves to avoid draconian cuts in city services. When we ended 2021, we ended just above our goal at 12.4%. Our goal was 12. For the 2022 budget, we are proposing 14.2% reserves, a significant increase in our reserves to shelter and protect us from uncertainty in these economic times. I will say those reserves have promoted confidence in the market. We are a AAA rated city because of it and because of the financial management practices adhered to by our agencies, by our administration, by our leadership, by our city council. We are fortunate to be in that proposition. It allows us to get a better interest rate when we go to the market on our debt transactions. So we need to make sure that we are maintaining these responsible financial practices. This $1.49 million proposed budget for 2022 represents a critical catalyst for our overall financial plan and our recovery. This budget is fiscally responsible. It supports our work to provide a good job, a safe home, a vibrant and diverse community, and equal access to opportunity for all residents. Thank you, and I will turn it back over to the mayor for questions.
I got to tell you that as mayor of the city, I could not, as we as people of Denver could not be better served than the leadership and the great management of Brendan Hanlon and Stephanie Adams, our budget director, and the entire finance team. And so I just simply want to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. A lot is being placed in terms of the burden of turning this city around and moving our nation forward, particularly on local governments. And it's not a woe is Denver. This is about the whole nation and cities all over this country are challenged with the need for more housing and affordable housing, dealing with the issues of homelessness, of course, the challenges of the pandemic, crime rising all over this country. And so we are called to do a lot and to respond to a lot and to do everything we can to abate the challenges of our society today. And so not only having a great finance team, but having a dedicated cabinet and agency leads, everyone leaning in, 11,000 city employees, and the residents of this great city have also taken on their shoulders to say, let's do everything we can to keep Denver solid and strong. So we just want to thank everyone and know that this budget that we put forward reflects, I think, the values of our city, the values of people who call the city home, to do everything we can to address those challenges that we're facing. With that, I think we're going to go question and answer and try to get through this.
All righty, Esteban with Denverite, do you have a question?
Good morning, Mayor. Brandon, I wanted to ask you, you've been presenting what seems like every other week to City Council, and there have been moments where members have been critical of the way this administration wants to spend its money. Are there any parts of this budget where you or Mayor Hancock anticipate some pushback or criticism from city lawmakers?
I always anticipate that our engagement with City Council will be a dialogue, that we don't always agree on everything, but there's a strong partnership there to find common ground, and that's frankly the whole point of our council process and the engagement between the administration and City Council. So I'm in front of council all the time because it is part of that dialogue, and when we come to resolution, like I mentioned, the budget has to be passed by City Council, ARPA has to be passed by City Council. We have nearly 2 weeks worth of budget hearings, so I imagine we'll have some robust conversation.
You know, Esteban, that's a great question, and I'll tell you that this is part of the organic and natural tension that's supposed to occur between management of the city and the legislative body to ask questions, to probe a little deeper and a little further. I sat on City Council for 8 years, for 2 terms, as you know, and I remember being in the same position to ask for clarity, ask for more information. Can we do more here? Can we do less here? That's a natural, organic process and checks and balances of local government and our republic system here in Denver as well. But I also recognized that while Mayor Hickenlooper was in charge, that he and his agencies have a much different perspective in terms of the responsibilities of managing the city than as a member of city council. I just don't have the broad perspective, the intel in terms of the nuts and bolts of what it takes to run the city every day, to have my hands on the reins. And I had to respect that. And I had to, once they had we had the answer and the information to move on or to ask for further clarification. But it's the process that I had to understand that I simply didn't have the broader perspective that is required to make some of the very intricate decisions in running the city. And it's the same situation in this case. And we try to educate council as much as we can, give them as much information as we can, so they too can make good, informed decisions.
Esteban, did you have a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Sure. Joe with Denver Post.
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Given the uncertainty around our economic recovery, what would be on the chopping block first if you have to prioritize, what will be cut, what is at most risk?
Are you asking, Joe, in response to if 304 passes? Joe? Well, I'll take it from that perspective so we can move along. Obviously, we have been at this watering well before with regards to the Great Recession. There were a couple of times while I was on council, we had to cut the budget from $70 million, cut $100 million out of the budget as we were in the Great Recession. Obviously, last year, we saw where... did you say?
You said yes.
Okay. Thank you. The last year, as budget, as CFO Hanlon pointed out, $211 million impact in this city's general fund. We had to respond quickly. It is not something you want to do. And let me be very clear, this would be a permanent ratcheting down from a 4.81% tax rate to a 4.5% tax rate. We would have to stay under that. It would inhibit our ability to continue to address the issues that the people have said are important for us to address. Housing, affordable housing, homelessness, preschool, climate change, transportation, roads, solid waste, safety. Our quality of life would be impacted. So we would have to permanently ratchet down and continuing to hold the line on those efforts in a city, by the way, that has been growing, continues to grow. We grew by 30% over the last decade. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think it makes smarter sense for us to review how measures get on the ballot as opposed to permanently tie the hands of a city that has to respond and to maintain a level of quality of life based on growth and opportunity.
Joe, did you have a follow-up?
Today, Joe.
No, thank you very much.
Is there anyone else on the line?
All right, then with that, let me again thank all of the city agency leads who are here. To Stephanie Adams, our budget director, did a phenomenal job in the construction of this, and Brendan Hanlon for your overall leadership of our financial operations. Thank you all.